There comes a moment when you know you have to do something new. Jack Carr went from Navy SEAL commander to best-selling author of The Terminalist. He shares how to know when it's time to move on and embrace a new mission. I'll get into it all on this Arroyo Grande show. Come on. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Welcome to Arroyo Grande. Go subscribe to the show now. Turn the notifications on. You want to know what's coming. We've got a great series of interviews coming. And for 20 years, Jack Carr served the country as a Navy SEAL. He led special operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, the Philippines. He poured all that experience into action-packed thrillers like The Terminalist, The Devil's Hand, and his most recent book, Cry Havoc, a prequel to The Terminalist. He is a New York Times best-selling author. Of course, it's a joy to have Jack Carr join us on Arroyo Grande. Jack, thank you for being here. You just got back from Morocco. What were you doing there?
I did, doing a little filming there for the next season of the TV show. So for True Believer, my second book. So we're going to wrap that up over the next month and a half or so. And I don't know exactly when it will come out, but I think next summer, based on the past events. I would guess next summer, but nothing official yet.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about Dark Wolf, the new prequel to The Terminalist, and which is really fascinating. We'll get into that in a little bit. But you first learned about the Navy SEALs when you were 7 years old. How did that happen?
That's right. Well, I'll tell you, but first I promised my wife that I would let you know that we enjoy watching you so much when you're on TV and when you're on Laurel. You bring a logic, humor, and most importantly, I think, a thoughtfulness to everything that you do.
Oh,
so,
Jack, well, thank your wife. Your wife has very good taste, Jack. I'll accept that.
She does. I'll take that too.
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you.
But yeah, I found out about SEALs early on. I think serving the military was just in my blood regardless. But I also had some family military history. My grandfather was killed off Okinawa in 1945. He was a Marine Corsair pilot, which are those planes that have the gull wings that fold up so they could fit on aircraft carriers. And back in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a TV show on called Black Sheep Squadron with Robert Conrad as Pappy Boynton. And Pappy Boynton was a Marine Corsair pilot, served in World War II, received the Medal of Honor, and he was a POW actually. And so that was that generation, like my father's generation and mine at the time, connection to his father, who he never knew. It was through the medium of popular culture because there wasn't Facebook. There weren't people you didn't know who to write a letter to. You just didn't know. You couldn't connect with that generation because they came home and just got back to work. So if you lost a father, there was very hard to find someone who knew him that could tell you a little bit. We watched war movies and TV shows and all those things. And I grew up with his wings, his medals, the pictures of him and his squadron, silk maps they used to give aviators back then, because if you had a paper map, it would just disintegrate when you hit the water. So a silk map would just get wet, but you could still use it. So I had all those things. I still have them today.
Wow.
So I think that made an impact. And then I found out about SEALs in second grade. So 7 years old, found out about SEALs once again through the medium of popular culture, through an old movie called The Frogmen. And my mom was a librarian, so I grew up surrounded by books and a love of reading, as you can tell here.
Yeah, I can.
And we went down to the local library and did some research. And back then, if you remember, you could find the end of the internet by getting to the end of that bookshelf. And I did all the research I could possibly do on SEALs and special operations in general, and I knew that was my path.
Amazing. What did your dad do, Jack?
He was an attorney and retired a bit ago. So I had that legal side from my dad and the books from my mom, and they both encouraged reading and read to me every day until I could read myself. And then by the time I was in fifth grade, that's about the time I switched from kind of the young adult fiction into the same kind of books my parents were reading. Certainly by sixth grade, I was reading those kind of books, and that was around the time that Hunt for Red October came out. And then I'm finding a lot of books actually through my mom, but also through the novelizations that they used to do back in the 90s. So I found Rambo First Blood Part 2, novelization written by David Morrell, who created the character Rambo back in 1972 with First Blood, a book that's never been out of print. And so I just started reading all those books with protagonists that had backgrounds in real life that I wanted to have, or in the books that I wanted to have in real life one day. So I'm reading all David Morrell, Nelson DeMille, A.J. Quinnell, J.C. Pollock, Mark Olden, Louis L'Amour, Stephen Hunter, Tom Clancy, all these guys who became my professors in the art of storytelling. And I just feel fortunate that my parents made reading and books just as natural as sitting down to eat.
Well, I love that your mother read aloud to you. I recently had Megan Cox-Curtin here, who's the children's reviewer. She reviews children's books for the Wall Street Journal. She wrote a book called The Enchanted Hour, and it's about reading aloud and the power of reading aloud. Give me a sense of what that did, how that shaped your sense of adventure. There's something also, there's an emotional connection made, I think, when parents and family members read to their children and vice versa.
Certainly, I still have memories of that, of going over to pick a book on our bookshelf, picking it out, running over to the couch, and sitting there with them. They'd switch off nights of who's going to read to us, and sitting there. And I can remember all the way back to books like Make Way for Ducklings, or like Tony's Hard Work Day, or The Giving Tree, and all those books. I have these amazing memories of them reading those to me, and then us, as I had my brother and sister, growing up, and us all being there together on the couch, no TV on, nothing like that. But you're right. There's a connection that comes through reading that doesn't really come any other way. And it was really foundational to everything that I was going to do later in life, both in the SEAL teams and then now as an author.
It's amazing. No, the imprint, because you're also imprinting tone, values, the intangibles in between the imaginative sharing of that story. She's right. It's an enchanted hour. There's something enchanted about it, and deeply human. I mean, we're wired to hear stories, I think. And I want to talk about your 6.5 years that you specialized in communications and intelligence in the SEALs. How did that help you as a writer to shape the material and prepare? Writing, look, it's a daunting task. I've been there too. The start is the hardest part.
This is true. And then you get some momentum going, and then what you're doing is solving problems on the page. That's what I find myself doing. At range in Iraq and Afghanistan, I was solving problems aggressively and creatively on the battlefield. And then doing the same thing on the pages of a novel, but I can come back and edit those the next day if it's not great. So the stakes are a lot lower, obviously, when I'm writing the books, but very similar. You're looking for gaps in the enemy's defenses. You're looking to adapt to that enemy faster than they're adapting to you. You're looking to capitalize on momentum, but really problem solve. And so that's what I'm doing in the pages. And back in the SEAL team, so I was in for 20 years, but you're right, those 6.5 years that I was enlisted, I was in communications guy in my platoon, the comms guy, and then the intelligence representative for my SEAL platoon. And I don't know if those specific things helped as far as when it comes to writing a novel, but overall the 20-year experience certainly did, and not in the way that most people would think, and not in the way that I thought at first either. When I sat down to write for the first time, I thought, okay, I'm going to get the sniper weapon systems right. I'm going to get some of those types of things right, and if I don't know something about a helicopter or an aircraft or a satellite, I'll know someone who knows someone that can put me in touch, and I can figure the technical side out. But what I didn't realize all the way through my processes remain the same the whole time. I come up with a title and a theme and a one-page executive summary. I ask myself if that executive summary is worth the next year and a half of my life. If I say yes, I read it again with trying to put it in somebody else's eye. If they were to walk by a Hudson News and pull it off the shelf, if they were to read that on the back of a book, is this interesting enough for them to spend time in these pages that they're never going to get back? If the answer is yes, then I move on to the outline. And so even through that outline phase, I didn't realize until I sat down to turn it into the narrative, how much of my personal experience would come in, meaning how the emotions and feelings behind things I was involved with in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places would find themselves morphed into a fictional narrative. So if my character gets ambushed in, let's say, Los Angeles, California, as part of a completely fictional narrative, I can remember what it was like to be ambushed in Baghdad in 2006, and I can take those feelings and emotions and apply them to a fictional narrative. And I think that shines through.
Did that surprise you, Jack? I mean, you've got all these emotions that Reece goes through in Terminalist, for instance, behind the scope, as you call it. Did it surprise you the depth of those emotional memories and the wave of that while you were writing the book?
It did. And like I said, I wasn't expecting it. And then, but as soon as I wrote those first couple sentences, then I thought, oh, this is going to be a much more therapeutic writing experience than I initially anticipated at the outset. So it wasn't something that I thought about before that I started typing those first words, but now it's in every book. I get emotional in every book as I'm writing, and I think that's a good thing. Sometimes it's in those types of scenes, but usually it's in conversations with people, and as I get to know those characters. But Feelings and emotions certainly was a surprise to me as I started, and it's not a surprise to me now, but it's a part of each and every book.
Tell me about that transition from being a SEAL for 20 years. You're enlisted. You retire in 2016. What was the first thing you did? Did you always say, when I'm finished this adventure, I'm gonna turn to writing books?
Yep, from my earliest days. Actually, in sixth grade, I told myself that I would one day write a thriller that paid tribute to the short story "The Most Dangerous Game" by Richard Connell, written in the early 1920s.
Yeah,
and they still
great.
teach it some places today. I've found out, but I told myself back then that I'd do that, and I wanted the first book to be my third one, which is called Savage Son, because that's the book that pays tribute to that short story and really explores the dark side of man through the dynamic of hunter and hunted. But I knew I couldn't start there. I knew I had to develop these characters and get them to a place where I could then explore that theme. But I always knew that after my time in the military, I would write. And I think if I was a lawyer, I'd be writing legal thrillers. If I'd been drawn to medicine, I would be writing medical thrillers. If I was a police officer, I'd be writing some sort of a crime type thriller. But it happens that I was in the military and I write these political thrillers. And now this next one is more of an espionage type theme. But what really helped more than anything else was all that reading that I did. I mean, it helped me in the SEAL teams. I'd studied history, I'd studied warfare, I was studying my enemy, and that nonfiction study, coupled with all those guys that I read growing up, who essentially became my professors in the art of storytelling, and then add into the personal experience and that emotion and that heart from the things I was involved with downrange, that all came together at the right time and place, and sent the manuscript to Simon and Schuster a few months after I got out of the military, and they wanted it, and so off we went to the races.
How close is Reece to you? How close is James Reece to you? I mean, aside from your coffee habits, light roast with a little honey, half and half. I mean,
your homework. You've done your homework.
You bet I did. I've read a lot. And I mean, Ian Fleming did something similar.
He did. He's right over here, actually. And there's my Ian Fleming collection right over there.
I see them.
But and everything else in here is nonfiction. The other room over there is all the fiction. Wow. But yeah, he did do something similar there. But my character is definitely faster, stronger, smarter, wittier than I could ever hope to be. And as an author, and you know this, it's when you're talking to somebody. I don't know if this happens to you on TV. I'd be curious if when you get off TV and you go, it doesn't seem like it would happen to you because you're so good, but it would happen to me, and it does happen to me whenever I do one of those spots. I get off and like, why didn't I say this? That would have been perfect. But as an author, you can do that. As an author, you can come back to it. You can think it through, and you can have the perfect response to something in the pages of a novel that in real life, you're hitting yourself on the side of the head for, because you're like, oh, how did I not think of that to say in this argument or conversation or negotiation or whatever it might be. So, yeah, it's fun. I absolutely love every part of it. But we have a similar background, both enlisted SEALs, both snipers, both transitioned into the officer ranks and became officers, retired or got out of the military at the same time. We meet him at a time in the first book where he's thinking about getting out when he comes back from Afghanistan, because that'll be the last time that he tactically maneuvers guys on the battlefield. And when I got back from the last trip to Iraq, I knew that was the last time that I'd be doing that, and then I'd be in more of a managerial leadership position going forward. That wasn't my strength. So it's important to know your strengths and weaknesses. And it was time for me to get out. So I decided that after that, it's time to move on.
Well, while we're on Ian Fleming, and you pointed him out there, I know you went to his house in Jamaica to Goldeneye. What was that like? I mean, you sat at the desk where he created a number of those novels anyway.
I did, yeah. Wrote all those novels down there. I think he did some editing back in the UK, but it was incredible. I'd wanted to go there my whole life. And then my seventh book, I thought it was very fitting that my 007th novel was a Hatchet tribute to Ian Fleming. So I thought this is a great excuse to go to Goldeneye with my wife. And so we went down there and spent a week or so down there where he wrote these novels. And it's an amazing place, so relaxing, and got to walk the same paths that he walked down to his little beach right there, stood in the water, and just got to think about him being there in this place that spurred this such creativity and gave us Bond.
Yeah. Look, there's something about touching those places. You know, I took my boys many years ago. We were in London and went to Charles Dickens' house. And when you stand in front of that desk where he wrote, Great Expectations and Oliver Twist, I mean, it is an amazing thing to be, at that place where so much of this literature that reshaped our culture happened. I mean, and I think for an author, it does have its own power.
It does. It does actually. And in 2020, right before COVID hit, there was a manager who managed. I don't know if manager is the right word for it because it was more of a personal relationship type of thing with Hemingway, and he passed away. I think at age 100 or so, maybe even 101. In later of 2019, and all of his memorabilia went up for auction. And back then, I still couldn't afford much, but somebody, and it's behind a stack of books over there,
Huh.
got me Hemingway's typewriter that he wrote A Movable Feast on. So his
Wow.
typewriter is right over there in that corner, and it's just here, and I can feel it. So it's so I don't know, it's special. It's humbling to have that, and that somebody would do that for me,
Yeah.
and have a piece of history here as I'm writing my own books now, right at this very desk.
Yeah, there's something. Look, I wrote a book about a young boy who his family collected relics, and it's something I think we can all sympathize with. There is something about having those touchstones, and it's not that they have any magical ability, but they remind you of that person and the dedication and the work that goes into what you do. I know Jack Carr is a nom de plume. That last name is intentional, particularly the C in Carr. Why did you choose that name?
Well, first it was security, and then that kind of got blown right out of the gate, and then it went to something that Lee Child told me before I got published, and he said he was at this party, no one else was there. I think he was contractually obligated to be there, and someone called me and said, "You got to run down here to this thing if you want to meet Lee Child."
Huh.
And I hadn't published yet. I was hadn't even sent it to Simon and Schuster yet. I had a couple months left in the military, and and he said, "Yeah, you want to be on the shelf next to me." Next to Tom Clancy, next to Clive Cussler, next to Mary Higgins Clark, next to Patricia Cromwell, and all these best-selling authors. And I said, yes, sir. And so that's how that came about.
Oh, that's where the car came from.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
when do you write and where?
So here now, but it's more because we've moved around a little bit. The first book was really between 10 o'clock at night and 3 in the morning because that's the only time it was quiet in our house as I was still in the military. 3 kids, dog, wife, chaos constantly.
Yep.
So unfortunately, it's kind of remained that way just because there are so many other things going on. I'm doing some screenwriting now. I'm trying to.
Yeah.
I feel like it's more of like an entrepreneurial type venture these days when you step into publishing. Very different than how I expected it to be, looking at it through the lens of a kid in 1985 or 1995 or something like that, where I thought you write a book, you send it to New York, maybe you do one interview and some point show, and then you go back to writing the next one, and maybe you do a book tour. But I thought that's it, and that was appealing to me because I am very introverted naturally. I think I had to teach myself to be more extroverted in the SEAL teams just to be heard.
Yeah.
Much rather just be in a cabin in the mountains by myself writing, send it to New York, do my one interview, and go back to writing. But I saw we're living in different times. As I crept up on that first publication date, I realized, okay, we're carrying around these devices that are meant to keep us from reading, essentially, meant to keep us from doing much deep thought, and they're in our pockets every single day. And we're up against the biggest, most powerful companies in the history of mankind that are essentially keeping people from reading, and people are reading less and less. So I thought, okay, I'm stepping into this, and I need to support. I have a middle child who is severe special needs and needs 24/7 full-time care forever, and I really want to make sure that he's taken care of. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have to do other things than write, meaning I'm going to have to do this marketing and some advertising, and I'm going to have to do social media. I'm going to have to provide something of value to people throughout the year on these different channels, so that when that time comes for them to purchase the book, they feel like they're a part of this journey. But it's also a way for me to express gratitude, because in the past, you could only say thank you to someone on book tour and shake their hands, look them in the eye, and that's still so powerful. But then you didn't have any interaction with those readers for the rest of the year. And now you can. And so I try to get on every night. And if somebody says, hey, I got the book and I read it and I loved it, thank you. And I try to say, thank you so much, really appreciate that. Or someone says they watched the show. So I really try to get back to everybody, because I really feel fortunate that I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do from my earliest days. And it's sincerely appreciated.
It's a full-time job, Jack. It really is. People don't realize, in the old days, you could do that. You could write your book once a year, send it in, and then, do a couple of interviews and coast for the rest of the time. That's no longer reality. You mentioned your middle son with special needs. How has that changed you as a writer, as a father? Has it changed your perspective? Has it changed your work at all?
I'm sure it has, but I don't know exactly how, because I don't have anything to compare it to, because it is my life experience.
Yeah.
And he's in high school now, but still needs 24/7 full-time care. So I think it's made us closer as a family, and that's what's and at the beginning, essentially, that's all I could really hope for is that it would
Hmm.
more loving, compassionate people because it is so hard, especially for my wife. I mean, I get to go off on these trips and I go on book tours and I go to sets and I'm filming things and doing interviews, and
Yeah.
she has to deal with that day in and day out, and also raise two other kids, so that their memories of childhood aren't solely about us taking care of their brother. So we try to
Mhm.
really keep that in mind, and certainly extremely tough. But I think it's made us more loving, compassionate people, and I think some of that maybe compassion has found its way into the pages of the book. I have a character
Yeah.
who has a son that has the same thing, a mutation of the
Yeah.
NR2F1 gene, and that's Freddie Strain in the show that we're filming right now, and it actually
Wow.
came to cast that part, and I of the son, and I said, I don't think I should be involved in the casting of that. I'm just too close to
Mm.
it. Because I can remove myself when I'm looking at other things because I know we're making a TV show
Right.
and make the best show we possibly can. Things are going to change from the book. Once again, First Blood, the book, 1972, very different than the movie First Blood, starring Sylvester Stallone in the early 80s, but both fantastic. So I kind of went into it with that mindset, knowing things were going to change and that being okay. And I'm approaching it from the perspective of a student so that I can learn.
Mhm.
Casting that particular part, I thought that I was a little too close to it, so I didn't participate in that.
The writing in the overnight, I did that, for many years when I was writing, particularly fiction. I find, Bill Blatty, who was a friend of happy memory, he used to write in the overnights, and he said, he would start at like midnight and write till 4 a.m. And Bill would say, it's the time when you dream. And that the world is quiet and it's like your body is into the dream rhythm, if you will. So you're dreaming with your eyes open as you write. Do you ever get a sense of that?
I think there's something to that because even if I block off time during the day, there's still a little bit of my brain, a little bit of bandwidth that's wondering if anyone's trying to get in touch with me,
Mhm.
wondering if the kids are texting,
Yeah.
wondering all these different things. And at night, I know where everyone is. Everyone else is sleeping, and I know that I'm the only one up. And there's something different about that in my
Mhm.
headspace, just knowing. And I used to have that in the SEAL teams too. Even on training trips, I wouldn't be able to go to bed until I knew that all the guys were back. If we had like a
Oh,
day of leave or something like that, I just
yeah.
had to make sure I knew that everybody was back and safe before I could go to bed. And so I guess it's similar here. I just know that everyone, and I know I'm not expecting anything from New York or
Right.
California because being here in Park City, Utah, you get California late and you get New York early. And so you get the emails coming and the texts coming from both sides. So it might not be the most ideal place if you're in this sort of a business when you're dealing with both coasts.
Yeah.
But once again, feel very fortunate.
Yeah, no, at 2 a.m. you get very few emails. It's a perfect time to do your work.
I've got to change that. I've got to change it and just block things off and start working at, let's say, 7 a.m. and go to noon and just then start the day. But because the all-nighters are getting a little harder as I
They
get,
are
there's
hard.
a little more gray in the beard here. They're getting a little harder than this time than previous novels. I
Well,
think I
they're
did.
rough when you have to work during the day. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to do the
Kids still get up
overnights.
and go to school. You're still getting up and getting the kids to school and doing all the
Right.
rest of the stuff. So it's not like you can sleep in if you pull an all-nighter. It's
Yeah.
just going.
Well, I want to go back. Brad Thor, the author, gets your book, and he does an introduction to Simon and Schuster. Chris Pratt embraces it and turns it into this wildly successful series. Has his performance changed the way you approach the Reece character now when you go to write the ensuing sequels?
Yep, I think so, but not in the way that one might think. And it would have started with the fifth book because that's when we were filming. I started
Uh-huh.
writing that when we were filming the first season. But I think more in terms of flashbacks and memories to his
Mm.
father. I think that the first season, having those conflations with his daughter and his wife, and not knowing what was real and what wasn't, being that unreliable narrator, I think that. So it wasn't Chris Pratt specifically because I wanted Chris to play the role as soon as I started writing it. As a child of the 80s, I wrote my first sentence and I thought, who should play this character? And I thought, oh, you know what? I want someone who hasn't done this before. And I had no connections in Hollywood or
Yeah.
publishing. But I thought, Chris Pratt, I just saw him. He was in Parks and Rec, and so I'm a little overweight, jolly, fat, kind of funny and all that, hilarious. But then I saw him in Zero Dark 30, and that's right about the time I
Ah.
started first book. And I thought, I saw this change. I saw him change physically. I saw a different performance. And I thought, this is a guy who needs this for his career. He needs this book for his career. And of course, after I started writing, of course, then we have Guardians of the Galaxy and Jurassic World and A-list stardom and all the rest of it. So he took off. But before he did, and I thought of Tom Hanks in the 80s doing all comedies and then taking a risk with Philadelphia in the early 90s and then really being do whatever he wanted. And I thought, who's that actor for this generation? And I thought, that's Chris Pratt.
Wow. Yeah, because I guess Ian Fleming had the same experience with Sean Connery in the later adventures of Bond.
He didn't like him at first, and then he actually ended up writing into the book a Scottish background, future books. Definitely influenced his portrayal in the novels. But mine would be more the flashbacks and the conflations and the memories of his father and getting that wisdom and remembering it and allowing that wisdom to now solve problems in present time and in his contemporary. So it's that's how it's affected me, I think, more than anything else.
Okay, I want you to widen the aperture for a moment because, on this podcast, I often look for lessons that people can take away from your journey. What's the best advice for a person who has devoted themselves, like you did, to a mission for a long time, and now they're feeling this tug, maybe an internal mandate to shift to another mission? How do you know it's time to leave?
You just got to listen to that voice. There's a reason that we're all here today, and it's because our ancestors listened to that little voice inside them. Also, they were good at the fighting and the hunting. That allowed us to be here today. But they listened to that little voice inside. They listened to that sixth sense. I listened to the calling to test myself in the military and then move into publishing. That was a call. I listened to it. I think there's something different about a profession versus a career. We call it the career, the profession of arms, not the career of arms, for a reason. I look at writing as profession as well. And as I was getting to, and people are going to all have transitions in life, whether it's a job, a divorce, the death of a loved one, whatever it might be. And I knew mine was coming up in the military. So I got to think about it a little bit ahead of time. And I knew my passion was writing. I knew my mission was taking care of my family, specifically our middle child with the special needs. How do I combine those two to give me purpose? So if I can articulate my passion and my passion and my mission that can combine to give me purpose moving forward. And that's going to be different for everyone. Also being able to articulate what is important to you going forward. So even though I knew I wanted to write, I had a couple, I had to have a backup plan, but I also knew what was important to me, which was time, being able to control my time because someone else had done that for the previous 20 years, and then financial freedom. And that ties into our son as well. So if someone offered me an amazing job with crazy, some sort of compensation package, but I didn't control my schedule, instant no. I don't have to waste any more time thinking about that. I don't have to sit down and talk to my wife and say, oh, this thing is in this other city. Should we go out there? Should we look at schools? How's it? No, I don't have to do that at all. It's an instant no. So being able to articulate that, I think, saves time and efficiencies and allows you to focus your energy where they need to be. And mine was on the book. And then the other thing I tell people is never miss an opportunity to make somebody's day. And I tell that to my kids because the reason that we're here today actually is that a friend was getting out of the SEAL teams, and I didn't know him very well back then. Now we're dear friends, and I just heard he was getting out. He's a great operator, and I asked him to come to my office. We sat down. I talked to him about getting out of the military, introduced him to some people in the private sector, and then I followed up with him. And then 5 years later, in the fall of 2017, he calls and asks if I remember him. And of course I do. And he said, hey, I always wanted to thank you what you did for me in the military. And I couldn't even remember that. And he said, you're the only person that did that for me. I sincerely appreciate it. Always wanted to thank you. And I said, no problem. How's it going? He says, going great, but I heard you wrote a book. And I said, yeah, I have a book. It's coming out in a few months here. I have a galley copy I can send you. I learned what a galley was like 5 minutes before that. And he said, yeah, I'd like that, but I'd like to give it to a friend of mine. And I said, who's that? And he said, Chris Pratt. And I said, oh, that's very convenient for me. And so sent it to my friend Jared Shaw, who is now a producer, executive producer, writer, actor, and technical advisor on the TV show. He plays Boozer. And
of course.
He gave it to Chris, and Chris called the next week and wanted to option it. So off we went to the races.
Incredible. Yeah. And you know, that the military training, that discipline of saying, these are the non-negotiables in my life. This is the clearly articulated mission that we're on. Just this. That is something most people don't, frankly, have the discipline for in their life.
Yeah, I think it's because of that calling. You got to listen because so many people are going to tell you can't do something. And it doesn't even have to be them telling you on social media, telling you to your face. It can be a look. It can be a look from a parent when a kid says they want to be an astronaut at age 7, and you get this look like you'll grow out of it type of a thing. Those things can really impact a kid along the way. But I just never paid attention to any of that. And I used it as fuel. So I know how hard it is to go to buds. People told me time and time again how difficult it is to make it through SEAL training. And then people told me how hard it is to get published. Do I know how hard it is to get published? And I would just kind of shrug, like somebody did it. And so I have this thing where I say, never tell me the odds. Never, or rather, never pay attention to the odds. If somebody did.
I came across something, Jack, when you made that transition from military life to your writing life, you chose a logo which is on your hat, the crossed axes there. What's the significance of that logo? I saw it at the UFC fight the other day on the podiums.
I know, it was crazy to see that. We were there at the fight. I was sitting with Taylor Kitsch and LaMonica Garrett, both amazing guys. We're sitting there at the front row, and to see the cross tomahawks in the UFC ring was wild. But so tomahawks have a history in the martial culture, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. To have a totem of sorts, once again being a child of the 80s and having this connection to Sylvester Stallone's character Rambo, and his knife, which became a big thing in the 80s. Yeah. Knife and the bow and the arrows and all that stuff, but the knife was the thing in the 80s that really stuck with that character, and it's not in the book. It's not in Morell's novel. It was something that Stallone brought in because he knew the importance of having some sort of a totem. And so I thought, well, I need something like that for my character, and I can't just do another knife because that's been done time and time again, and no one's done it as well as Sylvester Stallone did it with Rambo. And I thought, tomahawks. I've always had a thing for tomahawks since I was a kid, from throwing them, and I just love that First Nation type history stuff, and I just had this connection. And guys did carry them downrange also.
Oh, really?
So they were used downrange. And Daniel Winkler in Boone, North Carolina, he did all the knives and the hatchets for Last of the Mohicans, the movie. Mm-hmm. And I got to know him over the years. And so when I got out of the military, when I had my retirement ceremony, I gave my kids 4 gifts. And I gave them a Bible and old nautical compass, an antique vintage nautical compass. And I said, here, these 2 things are to guide you. Then I gave leather-bound edition of the Constitution and Bill of Rights. And I said, here's our natural rights. And then I gave them the tomahawk. And I said, and here's the means to defend them. And so I was in my office, and I had the kids, because I didn't want to leave them in their rooms with them because they were still very young at the time. So I had 3 tomahawks there, and I was thinking about this logo and this totem for my character. I wanted my character to be a student of history and of warfare, and so I wanted to give him this tomahawk, and it has this connection to the SEAL teams. A lot of guys carried Winkler Hawks downrange, and I was looking at them, and I put them on the floor, and I crossed them, and then I took a picture of it, and I sent it to Daniel Winkler, and I said, do you mind if I use this as my logo as I get out of the military? And he said it would be an honor, and we're dear friends to this day, and I think I've sold a few for him, so that's fantastic. And so that's how the logo came about, and really.
I want to point out here, because I just watched these episodes of Dark Wolf last night. James Reece, in the opening episode of this show, which is a prequel, not in the novels, I want to talk about that in a minute, he gifts the other guys in the Brotherhood a nautical compass from Reece's father, books. I'm seeing the crossover here.
I have that. I think I have one of those compasses right here. Oh yeah, right here. So I have one right there. So that's the compass. It's an old Waltham compass from Vietnam. Usually worn on a Seiko watch, and I talk about how Tom Reece, the dad of James Reece in my novel that comes out in October, set in 1968 Vietnam, how he I don't say loses, but how he moves from the Seiko watch to the Rolex Submariner, which actually plays a role in future novels there. But yeah, there's that scene around the campfire, and I think every special operator, probably anybody that's ever sat around a campfire telling stories, will be able to. And I use fire very deliberately in my novels as well, whether people know it or not. It's in there because we have such a connection to it, and there's such a connection to storytelling. Because the stories, of course, were told around the fire, passing on lessons from warfare and the hunt, really, so that those lessons would stay alive and the tribe could survive and move forward. So sitting around a campfire and telling those stories, and James Reece gifting that, and gifting one of my favorite books, Once an Eagle by Anton Meyer, which is on the shelf somewhere. Right over there. It's right over there.
I know that's a big inspiration and was at the center.
It
your
is.
leadership.
There's a great and the lesson of that book, really. I mean, it's historical fiction and follows two guys from before World War One up to Vietnam. It's fantastic if anyone hasn't read it. But really, the lesson of that book is to see to your character, and your reputation will take care of itself. That's the lesson. And it's such a valuable lesson, especially today for kids with all these outside influences coming in through the devices in their pockets.
Yeah, no, it's really dangerous. The Terminal List, Dark Wolf, just premiered on Prime, as I mentioned. Explain to people, because it's not based on a novel. It's about Ben Edwards' background. That's Taylor Kitsch's character. How involved were you on this?
Yeah, very involved in all of it. And usually in Hollywood, they want the author out of there as soon as they can. Because they don't want you on that saying you ruined my vision, but Chris wanted me involved. Chris Pratt wanted me involved, and Antoine Fuqua, the director, wanted me involved, and we've all got to be dear friends over all these years. So for this one, we got to the premiere of the Terminal List back in the summer of 2022, and the numbers came in, and they'll never tell us the exact numbers. Amazon won't, but they were off the charts. They wanted more immediately, but Chris Pratt's booked out for 3 years. I mean, he's an A-list star. So he called and said, "Hey, what do you think?" And I was already thinking about spin-offs. I had a different one that I was actually writing up at the time, but he calls and says, "What do you think about doing a spin-off on the Ben Edwards character and explore how he gets to do the thing, gets to a place where he can do the things that he does in the Terminal List?" And I thought, "Chris, that's a brilliant idea. Let's do that one." And he called Taylor, and Taylor was on board. And so immediately we got into putting the story together and then pitching it to Amazon, and they wanted it. So that was by the end of October of 2022, and then we moved into so pretty fast, and then we move into to the 2023, and then we have a little slowdown with a writer's strike that lasted about 7 months, and an active strike on top of that, and then we could still do some other things as long as we weren't writing, as long as the writers weren't involved, and so we're all set to film in the Middle East, and then Israel happens on October 7th, and we have to scramble and find a new place to film because there were some security concerns, and so anyway, put us behind by a good solid year. The writer strike, actor strike, and then the war in Israel. So it's so we find ourselves now with the prequel that just dropped last night, or 2 nights ago, the first 3 episodes, and it's already doing amazing. Feedback is incredible, and hopefully we'll get another season or 2 out of it. I see a 3-season arc there, but we'll see what happens. We'll have to wait for the numbers to come in, and maybe we won't get anything, but who knows? Try to remain hopeful, but also know that this might be the last swing. You never know.
I think you'll get a few more seasons. It was really compelling. Look, I had come back from a long trip and I started watching. I said, I'm just going to watch a half hour. I ended up watching 2 of the episodes. So it's really compelling.
Thank you. And I think they just get better as they go along also. And it moves from this military thriller into this espionage thriller up in Europe. So change in tone from the first season. And and Taylor does such a good job. All the supporting cast does an amazing job. And we really got to be like a family over the last few years. And I hear from the other actors and from people on set all the time how that doesn't usually happen. And it's a really special thing that we put together. And people come up to me on set and from hair and makeup and say, I've been involved in hundreds of these things, and I've never felt this way on a set before. And that's
I didn't even know Pratt was going to be in it. I thought he was just, going to maybe make a cameo and disappear. He's there through a chunk of it.
He's that first 2 episodes you saw, and then he might be back for another one. I won't spoil it, but people can keep their eye out, and they might see somebody that looks like me in one of the episodes if they don't blink. If they don't blink.
Okay, we'll keep an eagle eye out for that. I'll get my scouts watching. The new book, Cry Havoc, is coming out in October. It's already getting rave reviews. Now, this is another prequel. This is the story of James Reece's father in Vietnam. Ryan Steck wrote the other day after reading the book, it's a scorching, immersive thriller that proves yet again nobody writes with more intensity, authenticity, or raw emotion than Jack Carr, and firmly cements him as not only the hottest author in the genre today, but a worthy heir to Tom Clancy's throne. Was that an aspiration?
I just wanted to... Well, yes, because I didn't read anybody, obviously, who wasn't published, because they're not published growing up. And so what I saw on the top of all those books was #1 New York Times bestseller, whether that was a John Grisham or a Tom Clancy or whoever else. That's what I saw. So that's what I thought one did when you are 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old. You just think, okay, I'm going to write these books, and that's what I'll do. And then they'll get adapted to film or television, and I'll write more, and we'll adapt those. And so that's just what I thought it would be. So it's not like I targeted specifically for that. Certainly certainly there are lessons that I took from them, like branching off into the nonfiction, which Tom Clancy did in the early '90s. He had there it is right there. Look at that. Oh my
See
goodness.
that? Which
Look at
I'm halfway through.
amazing.
This is about Beirut, the Beirut bombing of the barracks, which is kind of terrifying, and I mean it reads like a thriller, but it's nonfiction.
Yeah, so I saw Tom Clancy did that. So in my head, even before in the '90s, I thought, well, one day I'll do that. I will also, when I'm writing thrillers, and at some point it'll be a natural time to branch off and explore nonfiction. I explore so many different events from history in the pages of my thrillers as it is, and so I did take lessons from Tom Clancy, certainly, and other authors as well. But then I also thought, okay, this isn't the '90s. This is a new century, a new dawn, and there's some other things I have to do as well. But I can take some of those lessons and then apply them to a 21st century type of a model and adapt.
Jack, you are a student of history, and I want your thoughts on some contemporary events. Talk to me about the Trump administration making the decision to bomb Iran in the way they did with those tactical strikes. There were some saying at the time this was going to spark, a world war. It would cause mayhem in the region. Your perspective on what happened there?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have done that. And of course, I like to look back on things after they've had a little time to breathe. Yeah. I don't jump on and comment on things as they're happening or right after they happen. I like to, as you said, I like to think of myself as a student and a student of history. So I like to look back on them after they've had a little time. Yeah. But certainly we were never going to let Iran get a nuclear weapon. And that no matter who was in office, some way. They were not going to be able to do that, whether it's an upstream type disruption, which is actually something that the Dark Wolf explores, or if it's something more kinetic and immediate, like our strikes were in Iran over the summer. So, but any administration, I think, would have taken some sort of action, and we've done it in the past, whether it's a virus or an upstream disruption, or now kinetically. The Israelis have hit kinetically, obviously, over the years. They've been doing a lot of our work for us, taking out some of the scientists and those involved in building up that program. So it's really a part of our foreign policy.
Yeah. Your thoughts on the administration labeling those cartels in Mexico as terrorist organizations? What happens now? I mean, give me your perspective as a former SEAL.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's something we thought a lot about before September 11th, because we all thought we were going to get into the SEAL teams, and we'd get issued our beepers, and all of a sudden they'd go off, and we'd go off and do the Save the Princess op, and then come back and time for beers, and that was kind of what we thought. And that was not how it was in the '90s. It was not at all. You were just training. And your job as a SEAL or your job in the military is to be prepared for war, be prepared to go to war. So that's what we did. So we did think a lot about some contingency type things like, oh, why don't they use us to do that, to disrupt the flow of narcotics into the United States? Okay, it just seems to be fairly free flowing. The DEA has a lot on their plate there. Yeah. The Coast Guard has a lot on their plate there. We could supplement somehow, and then of course we never really could. But some guys were involved in some little things here and there, I think, but I never was. And so we'll see. I mean, it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. And of course, you never want to make a situation worse, and you want to keep close tabs on things, just like a doctor. You never want to make it worse. And so we're going to keep close tabs on it and see what happens. But I certainly think that we could be quite effective in taking out some of these cartels with the lessons. Hopefully we're not very good in this country, I guess, as people, in taking the lessons of the past and applying them going forward as wisdom. And we had 20 years in Afghanistan. We never even did it there. Had a little less time than that in Iraq, and then had to go back and all of that. But we're not really good at taking those lessons and applying them. But we can take some of those lessons, apply them to this, and hopefully change quickly if the course needs to be corrected.
Yeah. Well, you've seen these stories of these Chinese cells here in the United States at colleges. There was that police station. How widespread do you think this is? Active Chinese cells here in the United States, or even Islamic cells from the Middle East?
Yeah, well, I think it would be fairly robust, meaning we have essentially an open society, which those societies don't. But they can look at us, and what you want to do is exploit weaknesses of your enemy. So what is our weakness? Well, maybe it's that we are such an open society, such a giving society, such an understanding society. And so I would say that we are fairly infiltrated, particularly by the Chinese at all sorts of different levels, public and private. And there's a lot of overlap now these days, of course. force when it comes to technology there. And on the terrorism front as well. I mean, I would be shocked if we haven't been exploited and there weren't cells in the United States, just because that's what I would do.
Wow. What's the greatest threat you think we face as a country? And what do you make of this church shooter situation in Minnesota?
So heartbreaking. Just that. I mean, I can hardly even just look at it, which is why I get asked to come on and comment about those things. And I always say just no, because it's just so hurtful, just personally. You know, it's just so heartbreaking. Sorry, what was the other question? I started thinking.
The other question. Well, I'm with you. It's such a depressing thing. I mean, we were talking for a minute before we came on. When you get, because of the nature of what I do, you get dragged into this, and because it was a Catholic church, it affects the other half of my life. The show I have at EWTN, and you look at this and you wonder what is motivating this, but more importantly, the human tragedy here for these families and these babies, who were taken. Their lives taken at such an early age. But the other question was, what's the greatest threat we face as a country, in your estimation?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think it comes from within. Depending on who you ask that question, if they're an expert in Iran, they're going to say Iran. If they're an expert on China, they're going to say it's China. That sort of, if they're an expert in Russia, they're going to say it's Russia, type of a thing. So kind of the boogeyman in the closet is the one that you're the expert in, that you're the matter expert on. So, but really, I think it comes from within. It's us. We're our own worst enemy in many cases, unfortunately, because we don't take those lessons of the past. We are consuming so much media that's shoved down our throats. But that media is also controlling our thoughts and actions. So a lot of people don't even realize that this device in their pocket is doing that. It's not just advertising, it's controlling your thoughts and actions. So I think recognizing that is the first step, and then making decisions based in that voting in particular, but based on history and based on study and based on deep thought, rather than some sort of an influencer, or even worse, some tech company algorithm, or even worse, a tech company algorithm AI that is now morphing your thoughts and behaviors. And I think that's probably our greatest
that's what's so scary. You answered exactly what I thought you were going to say. It was a foreign threat. You answered exactly what I would have, which is we are our own worst enemy. We are our own greatest threat because of this thing. And that people say, well, I've been hearing this and I've been seeing that and I've been seeing that. And I want to tell them, pal, slow your roll. The algorithm's just spitting back more of what you're already consuming. It's tailoring the thread to you. You don't realize it, but that's what's happening. So you're right. The repetition of these thoughts with no interruption is so dangerous, and it's reading our thoughts in some ways.
Oh, it certainly is. It's listening right now. I'm sure I'm going to get something out of this conversation. It's going to pop up on this phone right after we're off. But no, it's an interesting time to be alive. If I could go back to 1980, I think, and live it over, 1980 to 1990, I think I'd do it in a heartbeat. It was
take your kids with you.
Yeah, take the kiddos and let's just go live back there. That'd be fantastic. My time machine now, though, are the books that I read back then, the movies that I watched back then. I actually want to get a DeLorean and park it in some sort of a little theater thing that I build, and then I can watch things on RCA video disc, VHS, and data, and just watch it through the windshield, sitting in the DeLorean. That's my goal.
That's your dream. My son is a huge Back to the Future fan, so I think he'd share that dream with you. He wants to come over and play.
That's fantastic. There was a great novelization of it. I read it in the summer of 1985 and saw the movie, the novelization. It was fantastic.
Unbelievable. Okay, it's time for our Arroyo Grande questionnaire. I ask all of my guests a series of these questions, okay? These are just quick, rapid response. You don't have to think deeply about it, and you're a deep thinker, so I don't want to drag you into that. Okay, who's the person you most admire, Jack?
Oh, my goodness. It's my parents, but then also my grandfather, who I said I never knew and just knew him through these photographs. So he's kind of my idealized hero, I guess you would say, because I never knew him, and I never knew him to have any faults, and I never knew him. He didn't have to grow old and all those things. So he's the idealized version of a hero to me.
Who's the person you most despise?
Ooh, geez, that is a great question. It's in general, it is rude people, I think. Yeah, more than that, mean, rude people. And unfortunately, these devices, once again, in the comments section, they don't lend themselves to discourse. Yeah.
Civility's not high on the AI chain.
It's not the opposite's true. So yeah, rude people, I would say in general.
Okay, Jack, what is your best feature and your worst?
Oh, geez. Best feature, maybe it might be the same. It might be just being so focused on something when it comes to the books or a project or whatever it
Ah,
may be, that becomes all consuming. I think because I want my readers. I, I don't want to waste their time.
yeah.
And I don't want to be like that device in the doom scroll. I want
Mm.
someone to if they're spending time with me, if they're trusting me with that time, they're never going to get back. Then I want to honor that, and I take that very seriously. So I think that's probably a good trait, but also a bad one at the same time because there's other things happening in life and family and juggling all that and all the rest of it. So that drive might be both.
Yeah, you're focused. You're so intensely focused, but it's necessary to get these works out. It's part of the imaginative occupancy. You know, your mind can only hold so much. I totally get it. What do you fear, Jack?
Ooh, what do I fear? These are deeper questions than I was anticipating.
Well, this is the Arroyo Grande way. This is how we roll.
Yeah, it's good. I love it. I love talking to you. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fearful for my kids.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that pops to mind.
Hmm.
It's all about them, and I just worry about them. Like we just talked about the school shooting, whether it's physical, whether
Yeah.
it's not physical, it's emotional. It's being controlled by other people through those devices, or having that impact them, or relationships, or whatever it might be going forward. It's just a different time, and I'm glad I'm not growing up in that time.
Yeah.
So most fearful for those my kids and then the future generation as well. It's I try to remain hopeful, especially when I sit down with my wife at the end of the day and have that glass of wine and talk about things in the future and the day and everything. We try to remain hopeful, but
Yeah.
it's very difficult.
Well, you have to arm them for the reality around them. And it is, in many ways, there's a veneer, I think, in some ways, that we live in. And there are dark realities for them as well that you have to prepare them for. And it's a lot darker than when we were growing up. It just is. The greatest virtue is what, Jack Carr?
Oh, greatest virtue. I know. I think it's that knowing. It's that character. It's I don't know if that's an actual virtue or not, but we talked about character earlier, and really
Yep.
that's foundational to everything else that you're going to do. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of things that are involved in that, but yeah, that character, and that's gonna see you through, or it's gonna lead you astray. So
Yeah.
just tend to it, that heart and that soul.
What is your greatest regret?
Ooh, that is also a good question, and I think I've thought through this before. I don't like tend to dwell on regrets
Yeah.
because you can go back and I can pick out and nitpick 1,000 different things, of
Yeah, we
course.
all could.
So I couldn't say, oh, I have no regrets. Of course, I'm going to have a million
Yeah.
regrets of varying degrees. I can go back to that first book and read a sentence and go, oh, I could have made that so better, or so much better, or that character, and say,
Oh,
oh,
but that's not a greatest regret. This is a
no,
greatest regret.
those are the ones that I'm thinking of because it's the career path, trajectory, profession. So it is what I think about. I do know what it is, and I would have spent more time with my grandmother. I
Hmm.
wish that I could have spent more time with her. I thought that she was going to live forever, and she was so important to me growing up. Both parents worked, and so I spent so much time with her. Got to see so many great movies back in the 80s with her. See Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark when I was way too young, seeing those faces melt when I was like 8 or something, and or maybe 7. Yeah, 7. So it was 6. I don't know. I was too young. But going to all those movies with her, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and War Games and all that. So we used to
Huh.
just go to Blade Runner. We saw. So I have such wonderful memories being with her, watching the James Bond movies on HBO because she had HBO, we didn't.
Ah.
So we got to do that, and I just thought, as a child of the Depression, and then work living through a World War, and then everything else afterward, that she was just gonna live forever, and
Hmm.
obviously she didn't. So I wish I could have spent one more dinner with her, and I think I did. I mean, I did. I think I did a pretty good job, but I just do look back on that as a regret, as I wish I could have
Yeah.
more with her.
But what a gift, having great grandparents. I grew up with both my grandparents in my life, and then my great grandmother lived with us. So the impact of that, all of that, cultural wisdom that they kind of impart without knowing it. She introduced me to Abbott and Costello, and oh my gosh, Jack Benny. Oh, I would have never known those people if it weren't for my great grandmother, who loved them and kind of introduced me to them and knew them a little bit. So it's kind of fascinating. What do you know that other people don't know, Jack?
Ooh, I don't know. I look at myself as a student, so I never thought of it in that way. I've never even considered that much. What do I know that most people don't? It's more that I just try to treat people with respect and be kind, and be respectful, but also know when it's, you have to know when it's time to not. The old Patrick Swayze philosophy from Roadhouse, be nice until it's time to not be nice. There's some wisdom there, but for the most part, just it's not something that I know that most people don't, but it's just something that seems very, very simple. Just treat others, be kind, lend that helping hand, be a good citizen, be a good father, be a good husband, like those basics. Like if we can do the basics right, there's nothing you can't do.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Well, the one that I mentioned a minute ago, but it's my advice, so I'm going back.
That's not allowed.
Never miss an opportunity to make somebody's day. When it comes to writing, there's a couple though that come to mind.
Oh, good.
Specifically, and one of them is the only difference between a published author and an unpublished author is that the published author never quit. And I think that comes from somebody in the 70s. I think it comes from a woman author in the 70s sometime, but it's been repeated. It's been often repeated, but that's a good one. Then also, since we're on writing, to write it for yourself. People today, I think, they see the end result. They finish the novel or whatever they're working on. So whether it's a novel or just a project, it's making sure that project, that product, in this case, it's a book, is the best it can possibly be before any bandwidth is wasted on how do I find an agent? How do I find a publisher? Do I need a website? Do I need a social media presence? Do I have to have a podcast? Before you've done any of that, make the book as good as you can possibly make it, and then start thinking about those other things.
What is your favorite book and the last one you read?
Well, the one on the shelf right here, Once an Eagle, but I have five favorites. Once an Eagle by Anton Meyer, The Winds of War, War and Remembrance by Herman Wouk.
Herman Wouk, yeah.
And then The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Like those five right there would be my top fives. And the last one I just read, I'm working my way through Jean Le Carré. So in order now, because I missed a few along the way. Obviously, I was too young for some of them, and so I've read the kind of the standouts of each decade, but I haven't read them in order from the beginning. So I just finished The Spy That Came In From the Cold, and I just read, I think it's in the other room now, but The Widow, which is coming out by John Grisham, comes out next month, and I got an early copy. So I'm almost done with that. So I have about 2 or 3 chapters, which I'll finish tonight in that book, and it's fantastic.
Wow. Okay. Final question. What happens when this is over?
When this podcast is over?
I leave that up to you to interpret.
Yeah, I mean, so many levels to that one, right? And I think we just don't know. That's what faith is all about. Because you have to trust. We don't really know, but you do know if you have faith. So, so I think that's there's that. People around you will obviously, your friends and loved ones and family will miss you, but they'll move on. Hopefully, better for having known you and for the lessons that you've imparted. But it's that part's really about faith.
We will leave it there. Jack Carr, I can't thank you enough for being here. And Jack's podcast, Danger Close, is available everywhere. And Cry Havoc is out in October. Jack, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate all you do. And I'm sure I'll be seeing you on TV tonight or very soon.
You bet. Thank you, my friend.
Take care.
Okay, here's the haul. I love that Jack, not only is he obviously a disciplined writer and one who knows how to spin a yarn, and the books are incredible, but I love that idea that in a moment of transition, you have to clearly define not only your goal, but your mission, what your mission is and what's not negotiable in that transition. And then you find your purpose. That is such a great, I think, tactic when you're negotiating a big transition. And those can be traumatic moments. So Jack Carr, thanks for the advice, and we will continue to watch for more stories. I hope you'll come back to Arroyo Grande soon. Why live a dry, constricted life when if you fill it with good things, it can flow into a broad, thriving Arroyo Grande? I'm Raymond Arroyo. Make sure you subscribe, like this episode. Thank you for diving in, and we'll see you next time. Arroyo Grande is produced in partnership with iHeart Podcast, Divine Providence Studios, and is available on the iHeart Radio app or wherever you get your podcasts.